Cam, I want you to talk to our audience for a little bit about. I'm not sure how many in our audience know your full backstory, but you referenced you were there during the Parkland shooting, and you very quickly after that rose to national prominence because you and some of your friends were basically telling the country, like, are we going to do something about this, or are we just going to have like a school shooting every other week from now until the end of time? And so, I mean, go into as much detail as you want. I know it's like almost a touchy subject, so I hesitate to even ask the question, but tell everybody what it was like going through that experience. What, did you have PTSD after the fact? What was it like when the right started like viciously coming after you when meanwhile you're just a kid who, survived one of the most horrifying experiences imaginable? Like, tell everybody your story here. I mean, I think it's super powerful.
So yeah, I was picking up my little brother who has special needs from this area where the special needs kids waited to be picked up early. My school, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, had 3,000 kids. So at dismissal, it was a stampede. So the kids with developmental disabilities got picked up a little bit early. So I would go grab my brother and bring him to my seventh period class, which happened to be theater, which was his favorite place to go because everybody gave him so much attention. And there was a fire alarm. We ended up going out into the bus loop because that's what you do when there's a fire, you evacuate. And eventually a teacher runs out at top speed and says, "Everybody get inside." Oh. And I was so confused. I was like, that's weird. Like, oh, okay, there's no fire drill is over. Why is this teacher freaking out? And then, and they're rushing everybody inside. And some kid near me said, "Oh, there's a shooter." And I looked at him and I was like, that's not fucking funny. So we all rushed into the nearest classroom. Thank God I was with my brother. He's not really great with the phone. It's one of his limitations. So it would have been really tough to be in touch with him while I was hiding. But eventually we find out there is a shooter. Videos are going around of people that we personally know dead on the ground, covered in blood. We didn't know where the shooter was because the Florida public school system architecture program is not very creative. And therefore, every hallway looks like every hallway. So we didn't know if the shooter was in our building. We didn't know if he was nearby. But while we were hiding, I recognized that what we were seeing was because of guns. That's the thing that shows up at every mass shooting. AR-15s, which we assumed was the gun being used because that's what was used in the shootings that defined our relationship with mass shootings as we were growing up. I mean, if you were born in 2000, mass shootings at schools are part of what you understand as the school experience. We were born after Columbine. Sandy Hook happened when we were 10. Aurora happened when we were 12. So we knew that there was going to be an assault weapon involved. There were rumors going around that 50 people were dead. It ended up being 17 people killed, 17 other people injured. And I was just like, this is the direct result of our politics. This shooting is not happening in spite of the American system. This shooting is the American system. So I gathered my classmates after the shooting to start an organization called March for Our Lives that led to millions of people standing up around the country against the politicians who are taking money from the gun lobby and not getting behind even common sense things like red flag laws, extreme risk protection orders, a bump stock ban, which Trump ended up signing and then taking back. And the more we learned about the shooter from my high school, the more we learned about the fact that this could have been prevented 1,000 ways. There were FBI reports that he was exhibiting violent behaviors. He had publicly commented on multiple platforms that he was planning on shooting up this school. Oh. And despite dozens of reports with the authorities, several reports with the FBI, at 19 years old, he was still able to legally purchase an assault weapon at Dick's Sporting Goods. And now there are 17 families who will never see their family member again because of that. So we had something to say about it. And that's one of the things when I talk about Gaza that confuses me so much is there were so many people who were so abhorred by what they saw in Parkland, but it seems as though it's fine when it happens overseas. And I said to them, guys, the fight of our life is not just against the American manufactured violence in our schools and on our streets. It's against American manufactured violence, using weapons that are manufactured by companies in which members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, own stock. Like, there are politicians we have who profit off of this violence. Yeah. That's the fight of our lives. And I just can't understand from a human perspective how somebody could see what happened at my school and what's happening overseas right now as anything different. They are the same exact thing.
That's so true. Cam, how have you maintained your idealism and your belief in the possibility of democratic change, given that, you know, I mean, we talk a lot about the issue with the assaults on democracy from this administration. I think that all is incredibly important. But I think your activism demonstrates that we've had a problem with democracy long before that, because if you ask the American people what they would want gun legislation to look like, you know, they would have backed a lot of, you know, the policies that, or if not all of the policies that you're pushing. And yet, because you have this influence of money in politics, that is not what we get out of our legislators. So what did you learn about our democracy through your activism, and how have you maintained your sort of idealism?
Well, I learned a lot about democracy just because I was 17 and I didn't know much about it to begin with. I knew more than your average 17-year-old. I didn't know what Citizens United was, and I didn't know about the threat that posed to our democracy. I didn't know that people in Congress were trading stocks, and I didn't understand the threat that posed to our democracy. But in terms of maintaining my idealism, I didn't. I gave up. Once we weren't able to get the assault weapons ban that we wanted, that I did not think infringed upon people's Second Amendment rights. I think that assault weapons are not safe for civilian use, and there are too many of them in circulation. And the Second Amendment says that we can have a well-regulated militia. We are not well-regulated right now. This is not a militia. And it's, again, it's just gotten out of control. But when we weren't able to get the change that we wanted to see, that a lot of our politicians promised us, I threw in the towel, and I took it personally, because March for Our Lives and the Never Again MSD movement, they started in my bedroom. Our first meeting that we ever had was, I was sitting on my bed and my friends were sitting around my room. So I saw what felt like the failure of our movement as my own personal shortcoming. I was not able to mentally remove myself and say, I am simply somebody advocating, right? It all felt like every victory was because of all of the great organizers, and every defeat was because I suck. But then a couple years later, Manuel and Patricia Oliver, Joaquin's parents, their son was killed at my high school. They asked me to come with them on a tour around the country on a school bus that was really rickety and hot, to different communities that had been affected by gun violence, whether that was in a mass shooting, whether that's police violence on a day-to-day basis, gang violence, different communities where gun violence had become a part of their life, and meet with different survivors, meet with different victims, and connect with people and just keep the movement going. Even though a lot of people have given up, even though after Parkland we weren't able to get an assault weapons ban, a lot of people said, okay, we're gonna focus on other things right now. I saw Manuel and Patricia, and they still had the fire in their eyes. They hadn't given up. And I said, oh my God, if these people who lost their son, who lost their entire world, who have an empty bedroom in their house and an empty seat at their dinner table, I could never imagine losing a child. I want to have kids. I have to meet somebody first, and that's the tough part, especially given that I'm kind of busy right now. But I could never imagine losing a child. And they lost their son, and they could still keep up the fight. So who the fuck am I to give up if Manuel and Patricia are still going? And that's really what kept me going. So I wasn't able to keep up the fight the whole time. I thought that I had lost the fight of my life. I still stumped for Bernie in 2020 and told people to vote for him because he was catching heat for his gun violence prevention record. And, you know, he had votes and was like, I think he got a D+ from the NRA instead of an F. So he needed people from the gun violence prevention community to come out and be like, no, guys, it's all good, vote for Bernie. And I did that because I was like, duh, Gun violence is not just a guns issue. Gun violence is a healthcare issue. There are people who get shot, who go into financial ruin trying to get help. There's people who commit gun violence because they are mentally unwell and they could have had mental health resources that Medicare for All would have guaranteed them, but they never had access because they couldn't afford it because therapy is extremely expensive. I have post-traumatic stress disorder and a laundry list of other things. And I know therapy is so expensive. I would be going to therapy way more often if it were cheaper. Gun violence is a policing issue. Gun violence in many different communities is a housing issue. Like, this is something where uplifting the material conditions of the working class is the only way we are going to be able to solve this. And I recognize that Senator Sanders was going to be the candidate who could deliver on that and end gun violence. So that was a situation. But again, even then, even the night of Nevada, where he mispronounced my name, thanking me on stage and called me Cameron Kasky, like, even when we felt like we won there, I just didn't have the spark in me that I did after Parkland. But then Manuel and Patricia reminded me that just because you can't win a fight overnight doesn't mean you have to give up. And then I see this genocide happening in Gaza and I say, okay, this is the same thing and I need to help people realize that. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's tough, but you got to keep going.